So if we don't simultaneously work on all four of those areas, I can do it. I have the capital, I have the knowledge, and I have the connections. At best, we will sort of make progress, but we won't get there. We've got to work on all four.
I want to hear more about the Decade Project. So within a decade, getting American business ownership to mirror, right, the nation. I love it. It's a concrete time frame. I come from a world of accelerators, and half of acceleration is having a defined time period in which to operate, right? And a clear ambition with economic upside that you can articulate. But this is hard, right? Let's talk about sort of access to capital for female founders, right? This has been a topic of discussion sort of around me for almost as long as I can remember, certainly a decade. And I feel like, sadly, I think we peaked at something like 2% of venture capital going to female founders. And I think it's actually been coming down a little bit over recent years. That pattern, I'm sure, like stands writ large against every sort of underrepresented demographic. So what are some of the concrete levers that you see that we can pull that are going to make a difference, that are going to help us achieve the aims of the Decade Project?
Right. Well, there's really four areas, Ian, and you're absolutely right. I've started 4 companies, and sadly, I've pitched, and I've been told that when they discovered that I had 2 school-aged children, this is a direct quote, "Am I a terrible mother and therefore have what it takes to be a startup CEO, or am I a good mother and not going to put in the time?" And so I think what has motivated, I know, just stunning. But what's even worse about that, Ian, my kids are now 40. They are not in elementary school. And I teach new venture finance at UC Berkeley. And my female students are getting variations of this same question as they're pitching for money. And so, part of this quest is to say, we're not just going to pretend and get better at this and hope next year's stats when they come out will be 2.1 or 2.2 or 1.8. We're going to really smash this. As I said, when we had Sputnik in the 50s and early 60s, President Kennedy didn't say, "Oh, let's just do a little bit better at STEM and hope that we will win this race." No, he chose a goal like getting on the moon. He had no idea, and most people don't even know we didn't have any other technology. We hadn't invented it.
We had nothing.
No. So I lay that as to say, if I had the box with the silver bullets in it, Ian, that would solve this problem in a decade, I would be serving them up. But what I know is they will come in 4 categories. They will come in the capital. I have the capital. And what we need to do is look at the capital continuum, not just startup capital, but growth capital, not just equity, but also debt, and really unpack and develop, I believe, new tools. I mean, venture capital was once an innovation. So we have got to really have significant innovations if we are going to continue that economic miracle that has been the U.S. And so I've got the capital, and that's got to be very, very deliberate. I'll give you an example. There is a fantastic community development finance institute that operates in the 7 deep South states. And they do about 87% of their loans to African American firms. They have a bunch of firms that are well on their way and in many cases eligible for like $900,000 lines of credit or loans, but they don't have enough equity on their balance sheet. And they don't have a rich uncle or somebody in their neighborhood or belong to a club. And the difference is they only need $20,000 to $25,000 worth of equity. We ought to be able to develop instruments that gives that Black entrepreneur the equity that they need while still holding on to the ownership of that company and be eligible for that very leap forward in doing that. So that's an example. So I've got the capital. I've got the knowledge. All businesses, but particularly women and people of color. We've identified 5 areas that they need upskilling in. I can go into those if you want. The next thing is connections. Women, it's changed a little bit, but, I was one of the first ones, um, allowed into the men's traditional clubs, whether it's Rotary, who had voted against women being in the club, or the Rainier Club. But just getting a get into there, as my close friend said, we get day passes. We don't get full membership. So that mentoring and connections. And then the last and probably the most important is I can do it, a belief that I can do it.
Yeah,
And
that conviction.
exactly, and we have a million. Ask any woman, ask any person of color, how many times people have rolled their eyes or looked the other way or just dismissed the fact that, they can do it, or when me and somebody else shows up, a man shows up, they assume he's in charge and I'm not. Now I'm getting old enough that maybe they do think I'm in charge, but for most of my career, they wouldn't. So if we don't simultaneously work on all 4 of those areas, I can do it. I have the capital, I have the knowledge, and I have the connections. At best, we will sort of make progress, but we won't get there. We've got to work on all 4.
Absolutely. Well, and some of this, I love this as a framework, right, for making change in the world. But I love something else that you said, and I want to kind of, talk about it. You said, hey, at one point, venture capital was an innovation, right? And as we all know, like innovation for innovation's sake doesn't actually do anything. You need innovation that gets people to change behavior. And it sounds like you have some pretty interesting ideas around win-win-wins in financial instrument innovation, right?
Yep.
Get a little equity stake on the balance sheet, use that to be able to pull in, and increase qualification for loans, get these teams and these founders and these entrepreneurs capitalized. Is that the first step? Is this a serial process, or is this something where you have to try and tackle all 4 of these pillars at once?
Well, on some level, we do have to tackle all 4 of them, but you can tackle them, interestingly enough, in sort of simultaneous ways. So I'll give you an example. Not only was venture capital a game changer, so was the idea of lean startups and Y Combinator and, Techstars and the variations on
Absolutely.
those accelerators, okay? But those were aimed at businesses that had a profile to have a hockey stick but in the United States, and I suspect in Canada and in most countries, but in the United States where I know the data better, 90% of the businesses in the US have 20 employees or less.
Yep.
There are only 20,000 companies in all 6 million companies in the US that have 1 or more employee that have more than 500. And so we need to invent the Y Combinator and the Techstars and the venture capital for all the other 90% of the businesses. There's fortunes been made around the world and businesses that never got any venture capital. In fact, only 50% of the companies that go IPO, the holy grail, have had venture capital. So when we need to invent stuff, we need to not only invent the venture capital for the rest of the businesses that can have long-term profitability, not just lifestyle businesses that everybody dismisses all these businesses as, but also we need to look at incubators, mentoring, and knowledge creation that the Y Combinators have been so fabulous at for the other 90% of the businesses.
Yeah.